Hello and welcome back to another episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life, as studies routinely show that those who read their Bibles regularly have significantly lower symptoms of depression, anxiety, and anger, whilst also significantly higher feelings of compassion, forgiveness, and a sense of purpose in their lives. So if you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. And today we're going to be going through Leviticus chapter 20, a notoriously difficult chapter to read, hard in its moral condemnations, and there are a lot of death penalties associated with certain actions that are going to be described here. Quite jarring for modern readers like us, but I'm hoping that we can see the deeper meaning behind the wisdom of these laws and how the moral laws remain, but the civil instructions or the civil penalties that are applied are not going to be carried out in the new covenant. And we're going to see how Jesus himself responds to a citation of one of these passages. It's going to be important because we're going to see verses like in Leviticus chapter 20 verse 13. We're going to see verses that mean that adultery, bestiality, other sexual crimes are not only going to be punished, but be punished with the death penalty in this theocratic society. So, without further ado, let's read the chapter. Oh, and just one more thing. Leviticus 18 actually described the sexual prohibitions, what was proscribed, that is, prohibited for the Israelites. Leviticus 19 moved towards the positive holiness code, and then Leviticus 20, what we're going to be reading today, is going to give us that punitive legal side. What are the consequences of the actions that are committed against what was described in Leviticus 18? Okay, so let's read. Verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Say further to the Israelites, any of the Israelites or of the aliens who reside in Israel who give any of their offspring to Moloch shall be put to death. The people of the land shall stone them to death. I myself will set my face against them, and will cut them off from the people, because they have given off their offspring to Moloch, defiling my sanctuary, and profaning my holy name. And if the people of the land should ever close their eyes to them, when they give of their offspring to Moloch, and do not put them to death, I myself will set my face against them, and against their family, and will cut them off from among their people, them and all who follow them in prostituting themselves to Moloch." So just a little bit of context here. Moloch was a god of the ancient Canaanites, and they would have a statue, the ancient Canaanites, of Moloch, a bronze statue of Moloch, and they would heat up the bronze statue until it glowed red hot, and they would put their children, their babies, on the hands of that golden statue, the bronze statue, and watch them burn. So that's the child sacrifice here that God is prohibiting. Okay, in verse 6 to 8, we're going to see the call of God to his people to bring them back to God, and what are the consequences of failure. "If any turn to mediums or spiritualists, prostituting themselves to them, I will set my face against them, and will cut them off from the people. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am the Lord your God. Keep my statutes and observe them. I am the Lord, I sanctify you. All who curse father or mother shall be put to death. Having cursed father or mother, their blood guilt is upon them." Verse 10. "If a man commits adultery with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall be put to death. The man who lies with his father's wife has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall be put to death. Their blood guilt is upon them. If a man lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall be put to death. They have committed perversion. Their blood guilt is upon them. If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall be put to death. Their blood guilt is upon them. If a man takes a wife and her mother also, it is depravity. They shall be burned to death. Both he and they, that there may be no depravity among you. If a man has sexual relations with an animal, he shall be put to death, and you shall kill the animal. If a woman approaches any animal and has sexual relations with it, You shall kill the woman and the animal. They shall be put to death. Their blood guilt is upon them. Verse 17. If a man takes his sister, a daughter of his father, or a daughter of his mother, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is a disgrace, and they shall be cut off in the sight of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness. He shall be subject to punishment. If a man lies with a woman during her period and uncovers her nakedness, he has laid bare her flow, and she has laid bare her flow of blood. Both of them shall be cut off from their people. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, or of your father's sister, for that is to lay bare one's own flesh. They shall be subject to punishment. If a man lies with his uncle's wife, he has uncovered his uncle's nakedness. They shall be subject to punishment, and they shall die childless. If a man takes his brother's wife, it is impurity. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless. Verse 22. You shall keep all my statutes and all my ordinances and observe them, so that the land to which I bring you to settle in may not vomit you out. You shall not follow the practices of the nation that I am driving out before you, because they did all these things. I abhorred them. But I have said to you, you shall inherit their land, and I will give it to you to possess, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God. I have separated you from the peoples. You shall therefore make a distinction between the clean animal and the unclean, and between the unclean bird and the clean. You shall not bring abomination on yourselves by animal or by bird, or by anything with which the ground teems, which I have set apart for you to hold unclean. You shall be holy to me, for I the Lord am holy, and I have separated you from the other peoples to be mine. A man or a woman who is a medium or a spiritualist shall be put to death. They shall be stoned to death. Their blood guilt is upon them. Alright, time for some deep biblical unlocks. In verses 1 to 5, we see how the vulnerable children are protected. I already talked about how the religious communities that neighbored Israel would participate in child sacrifice, how they would sacrifice their child to Moloch, a bronze statue. They would heat up the bronze statue and they would place their babies in the hands of Moloch, burning it before everyone to show their devotion to their god. The priests are commanded in this sense to take a public role in stopping such practices, and the emphasis here is not only on punishment but on the community's responsibility to prevent abuse and idolatry. And God's law protects children and condemns religious acts that exploit or murder children. In verses 6 to 8, God urges the people to consecrate themselves and obey the statutes so that they and their offsprings might dwell in the land, and that disobedience to the covenant that God has instituted has consequences, and the impurity of one can spread and affect the whole covenant people. So, obedience to the covenant is what actually preserves social and spiritual life. Then we see in verses 9 to 12, condemnation, right, of occult practices. So remember from verses 9 to 12, we see that mediums, spiritualists, necromancers, they're all forbidden because these practices again were tied to idolatry, manipulation of spiritual powers, and they often exploited people's fears. Israel is to seek the living God, not hidden arts. And true reliance on God precludes spiritual, secret spiritual, mediums, technology, shortcuts. We even saw this in Exodus, right? The Exodus story, it taught us something about fake spirituality and the true meaning of spirituality. God, the God of Israel, the eternal I Am, was the one in Exodus who was able to change the water into blood of the Nile. But then you also saw that the magicians of Pharaoh was able to do the same thing. Shortcut spirituality. When Moses put his staff on the ground, it turned into a snake. The Egyptian magicians were also allowed to do that, or they were also capable of doing that. But Moses' staff, the snake that Moses created, was able to eat all of the other snakes, and that shows who has the ultimate authority over all of these perverse, spiritual, medialistic types of these shortcut spirituality sort of stuff. And this is another thing that I want to point out. These things like spirituality, the like crystal sort of stuff, the astrology, all of these sort of shortcut ways to seeking spirituality, mediums, necromancers, witches, all of this, like, people have the perception that we don't have to worry about this sort of stuff because it's not real. But the thing is, it is real. That's why we should fear it. But we don't fear it, we fear the Lord, and the Lord has control over all of these things, because we saw in that Exodus story, we saw even now, that we are not to engage in this sort of thing because the Lord commands us not to. And we see in verses 13 to 21 a catalog of sexual violations that follows: incestuous pairings, adultery, same-sex sexual acts. And the text actually sets severe penalties for these in order to protect the family structure and the trust of the community. And the emphasis here is on preserving relational boundaries that allows families and society to flourish. That is to say, sexual sins here are primarily framed as social injuries that completely destroy relationships and the future of the community. However, we must address the elephant in the room, Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13. Now, there are other translations of this, but they all include that if a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination, they shall be put to death, their blood guilt is upon them. Sounds like if people engage in homosexual relations, they should be put to death. Now, just want to point out something here. This verse is not telling modern believers how to enforce morality. It is describing how ancient Israel functioned as a theocratic covenant nation. This is really important. Remember, the Bible is written for us, not to us. We're not the original recipients of the Bible. Israel was a nation that was directly governed by God without separation between religion and civil law, and a living symbol of holiness among violent pagan cultures. And Leviticus 20, what we just read, is combining moral laws, civil penalties, and covenant warnings. So it's important that we separate all of these categories. Leviticus 18, what we read 2 days ago, it lists forbidden acts. We saw in Leviticus 18 that homosexual actions, again, are prohibited. Leviticus 20 is listing the consequences within Israel. This is a particular covenant enforcement. It's not a universal criminal law. The severity of the punishments that we're seeing here shows how seriously God takes Israel's vocation. Not that every sin deserves the same response in all times and all places. So, why does the death penalty even appear in the first place? Even though it's going to shock us as modern readers in this contemporary society, Israel has just left Egypt after being slaved for so long, and they are surrounded by cultures who are practicing child sacrifice, prostitution, sexual violence, incest in royal lines, and what God is doing is preserving a fragile moral ecosystem. And capital punishment in Leviticus is actually rare in practice. It requires multiple witnesses. It is meant to purge corruption. It's not meant to fuel vengeance. It's about protecting the covenant, not hatred of individuals. And Leviticus 20:13 assigns the maximum covenant penalty to certain sexual acts, including those involving male same-sex intercourse, but this does not mean God considers such people as uniquely evil. Remember, Genesis chapter 1 verse 26 to 27, all people are created in the image of God. It means that these acts were seen as fundamentally incompatible with Israel's calling to image God's created order. But important to clarify that the same penalty applies for adultery, incest, and bestiality. This is about boundary violations. It's not about orientation. The focus here is on the act, not the identity of the individual in question. Christians believe that the moral teaching still remains, that certain acts are sinful, but the civil penalties do not. Why? Because Jesus was actually questioned about Leviticus 20, and he says, "Let the one who is without sin cast the first stone." Are you without sin? So that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help you keep up your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. I upload daily, so if you don't want to miss tomorrow's episode, feel free to rate the show and follow. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And always remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.